Good evening and welcome to your first edition of the Green and White podcast brought to you by Argyle Life in 2025. Hope you had a very merry and joyful Hogmanay. Of course, it was set up with a 2-2 draw at Home Park yesterday afternoon with Julio Pleguezuelo salvaging the point in the 92nd minute. Various little things we will come on to across the course of the evening. As ever, do get your comments and questions into the chat this evening. I'll be starring as many as I can, showing as many comments as I can, and we will get to as many as we can over the course of the next hour or so. Joining me this evening, clockwise, James, tell us about your New Year's Eve party. It sounded pretty hectic.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic. Most notably, it had incredible Wi-Fi speeds, as witnessed on the pod. So, yeah, a good time had by all. I also had to do New Year's Day. The birthday boy was also a Bristol City fan.
Oh, excellent!
So, a very diplomatic afternoon.
Yeah, hopefully they might be watching tonight and might contribute in the comments. Who knows? John Alsop, how was your New Year's?
Yeah, a lot of fun. Also had a Bristol City fan or two or three actually in the house. They came down to Plymouth for New Year's Eve. We hosted them, and yeah, took them into the game on Saturday. And I thought I was going to have to once again offer them congratulations at full time approached, I should say, and ended up being able to at least sort of minimally gloat at them, which was preferable. So yeah. A good fun time was had by all. It was a very New Year's-y kind of day as well, a bit like last year's game against Watford. You know, nice kind of diplomatic, to borrow James's word, sharing of the spoils. An entertaining game. Lovely stuff.
Everything was nice, but conditions. I think it's safe to say. Dan Ellard, how was your New Year's spent at Home Park? Of course.
Indeed. Well, I was just going to say, in contrast to the other two, I didn't spend it with a Bristol City supporting friend and didn't do a wild New Year's Eve party. I was on with you lot. But yeah, New Year's Day was good. Yeah, I enjoyed going to the game. Yeah, it was a properly horrible day, wasn't it? And kind of proper kind of swirly conditions and stuff. But still made for a good game of football, which was good.
It was an afternoon for the footballing purists, wasn't it? Just before we get into the full match run through, if you haven't already subscribed, we did tick over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube on New Year's Eve. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you playing at? Do get subscribing and make sure all your family and friends do as well. First question I like from Truth Plim 666. Where's Sam? Well, we've rotated out the People's Champion. He was meant to be here, but he's actually working, so. Sam will be back on in due course. Dan, New Year's Day, 2-2, Bristol City, West Country Derby, Premier League officials. Talk us through it.
Indeed. Well, in general, I thought it was better. Not loads better. I'm not going to sit here and say the manager's gone and everything's fine and it was a fantastic performance, but it was more like what we kind of hoped to see. I thought we were very, very fluid in the way we set up. I mean, it was quite interesting. I thought if you kind of did like a heat map of all the way up the pitch and people's positions, I thought it would be very interesting in that Ballymumba on the left side was allowed to kind of stay quite high throughout the game and offer us width on that side. Sorinola on the other side was forced back quite a bit more, as I think Bristol City targeted him quite a lot with a lot of diagonals and things and tried to isolate him. And I think he did pretty well not amazingly, but pretty well in kind of dealing with a lot of that. And also, Al-Hajj and Whitaker were very, very fluid, playing right across the pitch, almost like a kind of Kerry and Lemiras type thing from back in the day, where we just create overloads on either side, which was good. You know, it does leave us open in transitions to try and keep a kind of structured shape, and Bristol City could catch us out a few times like that, as they did for their first goal. But you know, I think we do need to keep playing like that in terms of offering something at the other end of the pitch as well. We don't want to be too rigid. We saw a lot under Rooney of, you know, both wide men staying really, really wide and isolating the 10 and the striker in the middle of the pitch. We were a lot more fluid playing in half spaces and things like that yesterday, which I think was was really helpful to our play and meant we created more chances. The main one in the first half being Ryan Hardy's miss after Al-Hadji's shot got parried away. Reasonable strike. Keeper perhaps could push it a bit further out of danger. Hardy's got a score, hasn't he? Absolutely got a score. You feel like a Ryan Hardy in kind of his when he's going through one of his kind of better runs of form would just bury that without thinking. Sticks it over the bar, and that really looked like
actually, Dan, he actually wouldn't stick it away without thinking. Ryan Hardy in a hot run of form would have missed that chance and then dribbled past 3 players and chipped the keeper from 25 yards into the top corner, just to issue a correction.
Possibly, yes, possibly. But 9 times out of 10 he scores that, and it's one of those one of those unfortunate things that really, like I say, really seemed to have knocked us back at half time. I thought we played pretty well first half, and then Bristol City score a goal which looks very, very marginally offside. It is close, but it does look like that final pass is just off as Hazard came out to commit himself. Second half was a bit of a slog at times, ironically, because we won the second half and lost the first half, but it was a real slog, especially after Bristol City went back in front. Struggle to get our passing together, struggle to get any kind of territory or meaningful possession. The game seemed to be petering out. We've seen enough of those where the opposition look comfortable enough and we're huffing and puffing and not creating a lot. Made a couple of subs, fairly routine, but did seem to give us a little bit more impetus. Sissoko came on and frustrated a few, but did get us up the pitch a little bit at times. And then, from a questionable free kick, I would say, awarded, Randall sticks it in a good area. We get the good bounce of the ball and Plegue's there to knock it in for what I think was a deserved point. Like I say, I don't think we were amazing. Don't think we were, I don't think it was our best performance of the season for sure. But I do think we were worthy of a point with the chances we created. And individually, I thought everyone played kind of ranging from kind of middle of the road average to some pretty good performances. I thought Pleguez, even before his goal, was excellent. I thought Morgan Whittaker had a really good game at both ends of the pitch. And it was, well, who knows, how many games of Nancekivell and Edwards we're going to have before we have a new manager in place. But I do think it was an encouraging first game for those two.
I think if it was a questionable free kick that eventually brought us to the equaliser, I think that was the least Tim Robinson could have given us on the afternoon, but more on his performance inside Home Park a little bit later. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed ref watch this week, so John has very kindly shotgunned it for us, but we'll come to that later. James, is it fair to say that was probably a tale of two halves?
I think we started with the sort of energy and pent up enthusiasm and rocket up the proverbial that you would expect from Edwards and Nance giving the team talk and setting the team up and the fallout from the the events of the past few days. So really great energy in the first half. I think that we just kind of reverted back to, or Bristol City started to show their sort of superior quality in the second half, as you could just see there was that. I think we've always looked at Bristol City as a team that we would like to get to their sort of standard of squad. I know it's sort of a joke on Bristol City fans that they're always 12th, but that is a place where we would love to get to as a club. And I think their quality, extra experience shone through. And I think that just played out in the second half. So yeah, a kind of a tale of two halves. Obviously, we did end up winning the second half, but the best of our play, my Bristol City friend, and obviously we're watching the game at the same time, was extremely frustrated by us winning those second balls in the first half. Like we were winning everything in the first half, and that sort of fizzled out a little bit in the second half. So I wouldn't say it was a tale of two halves. It was just that we couldn't keep. You can't just keep outplaying your own your own sort of ability for 90 minutes without a sort of obviously superior opposition sort of showing their class. But I thought it was a good performance overall and a good game.
I was just having a look at the FOTMob stats as you lads were talking there. I do occasionally have the ability to multitask, and I feel like I've mastered it quite well during that first 10 minutes. I was interested to see, John, that Bristol City had almost double the amount of completed passes in our half than they actually had in their own. Um, I don't mean this to sound disrespectful to Bristol City, but they've got quite an awkward playing style, haven't they? Where you look at it and they'll have two or three players that you feel like will get into possession, and then just out of nowhere, and it was highlighted by the second goal for me, out of nowhere they'll just have a runner appear from nowhere and he'll be free. I mean, Liam Manning he's almost, it's almost like a chess game when you're going up against him. At least that's what I thought from watching it where I was sat.
Yeah, I thought they looked really well coached. Like the epitome of a well-coached side. Are they a particularly good side? I don't think they're one of the best sides in the Championship. I'd be very surprised if they'll be in playoff contention, because pretty much everyone down to 19th in the Championship is in playoff contention with a month of the season to go. But I'd be surprised if they were seriously...
You mean there's still a chance we could get ourselves into playoff contention?
Said 19th, not 24th, so we'll see. But I think they looked really well coached though. I think Manning... And I understand this isn't necessarily a game-to-game thing for them, and I also understand their supporters are frustrated that they couldn't, which apparently seems to be a recurring theme for them a little bit, not only this season but in previous years. They couldn't convert what I felt was quite a dominant performance from them, actually, certainly in the second half, into a win. But just the sort of patterns of play when they did get on the ball, and even in the first half, I guess we were on top. We created the better chances, 1 second balls, but I felt that they always looked a bit more dangerous when they were sort of coming forward. The sort of their moves look quicker at moving the ball up the pitch basically than we did at times, even in the first half. So I thought they looked very well coached, and to be honest, I just think that sort of looks like a big difference with us. I'm less of a Rooney skeptic or was less of a Rooney skeptic, I should say, than certain other people in this podcast this evening, but. Yeah, certainly it's true to say that in recent weeks we have been looking just like non-existently coached, really. And I felt yesterday, and this is not to blame Nancekivell and Edwards, who have had no time with the team whatsoever, obviously. I just felt that, even though we played with heart and spirit and we created some decent opportunities and we never gave up, our patterns of play compared to theirs were just not in the same league, really, for me. They look like a Championship side, every inch of it, and we, despite getting a good point, and again, despite the chance creation, and I think there was a comment earlier saying our equaliser was a very well-worked goal, and I'd certainly agree with that. It was a lovely move, slick football, great cross from Morgan, a lovely finish from Rami Al-Had, kind of a redolent of Finn Azaz in his pomp, just kind of sliding it into the corner, tickling it in almost. But for me, I felt that even though Bristol City, who I think were probably having not even their best, not their best performance of the season by any means or anything like that, their sort of baseline level of performance looked well coached. We do not look that well coached, and hopefully that's something the next manager can address.
I think one of the things that struck me was just I think it was, you both all three of you have mentioned it really about our application and things, and we just carried a bit more intensity in that first half, didn't we, that we perhaps dropped off a little bit second half. But let's talk about the goals. Let's go through them in chronological order, because Dan, I'll come to you. We'll do it that way. We'll make our way round very quickly. If anyone has anything to say on the goals, just feel free to jump in. There's a question mark over 2 offsides, Dan. I think it's safe to say. But for me, the grating thing for me, whether or not it's offside, that's nothing that's in our hands. What's in our hands is the ball is played right through the centre of the pitch. That's really frustrating, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we'll get onto the second goal in a minute. The second goal seems more of a kind of gaping hole in our defence that was breached. But I think there's an element of it's a very good through ball. I think you can kind of look at it from both angles in terms of, yes, Plegue's kind of stretch not quite got there, but it is a kind of proper good through ball, well picked out. should Hazard kind of fly out there? I mean, he's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, because, you know, if he stays on his line, it's basically 2 Bristol City players versus him. You know, he's got to try and come out. Does he maybe fly out a bit too much to the edge of his area and leave the easy square ball on? I don't think there's a lot he can do more. To be honest, you know, we're in that position. We said Hardy scores his 9 times out of 10 from the position they're in. They score that 999 times out of 1,000. So yeah, it's one of those. It is a bit of a concern that both goals have kind of come from balls played through right the kind of heart of our defence. But like I say, in general, I think that and the majority of the big chances we conceded, I think, were perhaps more due to trying to keep control of the midfield. I think Such played pretty well. Pleggy, as I said, played very well. And I think generally our last-ditch defending was good to stop them having more chances. Unfortunately, on that occasion, like I say, a good pass. And maybe could he maybe shuffle across a fraction earlier? I don't know. I think it's one of those that you can kind of nitpick and say maybe we could have done slightly more, but it's a pretty good goal, to be fair to them.
If that was a good goal, James, you get the lovely treat now of talking through our first goal. One of the slickest moves of the game on a day where slick football was at a premium, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a really slick goal. And what I liked about it was I felt certain that Morgan Whittaker would check in and try and stand up his man and deliver it with his left foot. But he surged towards the byline, used his weaker foot to deliver a lovely deep cross in. So I don't know if that was something that they worked on or something they'd identified as a pattern of play that they would attempt to. Perhaps a fullback would be certain that Morgan would cut inside, and that just gave him that extra half a yard. But it was, on his weaker foot, and he does deliver a good ball with his weaker foot. But that was an exceptional, lovely deep pass, and the finish was had a bit of a filthy element to it, didn't it? The way he sort of nonchalantly tucked it into the inside the post. In fact, it was a kind of keeper was almost on that post. There was not a lot of room to aim for at all. So yeah, great move. Our slickest of the match, and I think it followed. If I've got my chronology right, a really good Hazard save as well, which obviously by going through the goals we might not return to, but that was a really smart stop from quite a poor piece of defending. And allowed us to go up the pitch and equalise. So those two moments were great bits of play by individuals basically, and it goes to what John was saying a minute ago about where our patterns of play throughout the game didn't seem to as advanced or as slick as Bristol City's or as ours have been in the past. We did rely on individuals in them to create great moments to me, and going on to the Randall free kick as well. I think you're on mute.
That's really good, isn't it, for the host? That's the way we want to start 2025. And of course, as I was saying, Morgan Whittaker then very quickly after, almost reminiscent of the Ipswich goal, just cutting in on that left foot, and it produces a wonderful save from the Bristol City keeper to tip it onto the bar via a deflection, I think. John, the third goal, Dan says again, it was sort of played through us, but it's also really neat interchanging play by Bristol City again, isn't it?
Yeah, it's it's a bit of both. I think you could argue. It's a lovely goal from their point of view. Really well crafted team move, and the finish is absolutely exquisite. I was sort of watching it from the Devonport end, so it was the other end to me, so I didn't have necessarily the best view of it in real time. But I'm sort of thinking, when the guy's running through, it's quite a tight angle. Hazard's a big bloke, it looks like he's kind of coming out, and I'm actually quite optimistic he's going to close the angle down and put out a big glove and or save it with his legs or something. But no sooner am I thinking that than the ball is just delicately dinked over him and almost in slow motion kind of lofts into the bottom corner. No, it's a lovely goal and brilliantly finished off. But yeah, I mean, obviously something is wrong from our point of view when not one but two goals come from. Yes, sorry, Aaron's on screen with football cliches. Claxon for my reference to a bit of both, which was very much an intentional bit. Thanks for noticing, Aaron. As I was saying, it's not quite the same goal twice exactly, but it's a similar area where they've hurt us. It's a similar type of pass, sort of slide rule pass that's been played through. They're both good passes. I don't think either is like, prime Xabi Alonso or something levels of like deftness on it where, even the best defenses would be caught out. I think there's a defensive organisation problem in there as well. But, to the extent that they identified how porous our defence can be and sort of exploited that intentionally and executed it well, fair play to them, I guess. Obviously, again, that's going to be something that our new manager is going to have to sort out once they get in the door.
Certainly will. And we'll come on to that in very, very quickly, the defensive issues that lie ahead at the moment. Dan, just very quickly, because I don't actually think this goal needs too much analysis. It's swung in by Randall. Obafemi challenges for the header. I'm not actually sure if he wins it or not. Comes back off the defender, and credit to Pleggy for keeping the chance alive.
Yeah, I mean the keeper nearly keeps it out, doesn't he? But it's a nice kind of poke towards goal, which did enough to go in. So kind of capped, like I said, a good performance from him. And I think kind of analysing it, as you say, not too much, but I think to win the free kick in the first place, even though it was perhaps questionable, we saw as the game went on, and obviously we had a bit, nothing to lose type thing. Such kind of almost went out into right back position when we were attacking, or kind of right centre back certainly, and that allowed Sorinola to just push further on down the line. Morgan came inside, and it was that kind of attacking width from Sorinola, even though he didn't get too many kind of good quality crosses in, that won us the free kick. And then, like I say, Randall putting the ball into a good area, which is good. Set pieces hugely important at any level. As we always hear. Randall had a good free kick opportunity right on half time, which sadly he wasted. But this was a really good ball into a good area. So you can say there's a bit of luck involved with the kind of bounce of the ball. But when you put good balls into good areas, that type of thing can happen. It was a massive relief. I think we talked a lot about how I remember when going back to when Ian Foster was sacked, and we just wanted to kind of keep the wave of optimism going and just keep, we felt like we had a chance of staying up and we needed to keep that going. The win at Rotherham did that, and then the win at Leicester did that, and that was obviously just enough to keep us over the line. Had we lost yesterday, it wouldn't have been the end of the world, but the point just kind of keeps a little bit of positivity going, and hopefully we can take that into Stoke on Saturday.
Yeah, so as you say, wave of just keeping the results going, isn't it? Grinding out results, particularly at home, where it's going to be important. James, I'm going to come to you in a second, but we're going to go to John. I want one player off each of you. I want you to take a player out of the squad to talk about from yesterday's game. Can be positive, can be negative, whatever it is. John, you've already claimed one man, and he came and claimed a couple of balls yesterday, didn't he?
I wanted to talk about Connor Hazard, because I was not at the Oxford game, and in fact, actually just listened to the Oxford game, so it's the first time I've seen Hazard actually play, with my eyes in a while. And I guess the main sentiment that I wanted to get across is that I think if we could crossbreed Hazard's ability as a shot stopper, command of area, the stuff that traditionally you want your goalkeeper to be doing well, and Dan Grimshaw's feet, composure, and vision, we'd have the best keeper in the Championship apart from Michael Cooper. But we can't do that, and we have to pick one of them, and it just feels like such a frustrating trade-off to me. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So I guess that sort of leads itself into an analysis of Hazard's performance that I think contains some really good things and some not so good things. His shot stopping, I think, is excellent. He's pulled off some of the best saves I've seen from any Argyle keeper, Cooper included, over the last couple of seasons. Hull away last season when he pulled off.
James alluded to it. Sorry to jump in. James alluded to it. in his monologue, didn't he? The save off Nancekivell is superb.
Oh, it's a great save. And I think with that one, it looks like he's unsighted with that volley, which is at fairly close range, not point blank range, but it's fairly close to the goal. And not only does he get across and parry the ball out, which is, I think, impressive. It would be impressive in and of itself. He manages to tip it around the post. So he's not pushing it. He's not palming that ball back into a dangerous area. He's not pushing it back onto the chest or the head of one of their players to bundle it over the line. He's getting it away from danger as well as making a save. It's an absolutely superb piece of goalkeeping. His command of area, Dan Grimshaw, is so much better than Grimshaw. Obviously, he has some physical attributes that Grimshaw doesn't have in that department, but I just felt so much more confident when we were defending corners and set pieces and things like that. I don't think either of the goals was his fault, as we've attested. The first one, it might look like he's had a bit of a head loss, but I think as Dan alluded to in his analysis of that goal, it's really the passes just on a defence parting like the Red Sea has sort of put him in a very difficult position there where he either has to come out and try and gamble and claim it, or he's going to be facing a 2-on-1 situation anyway where they could probably just shuffle the ball around him. But then there's the distribution side of his game. And the positive here is that it did get better as the game went on. As the game went on, he was getting his head up more quickly and bowling the ball out, and actually did a couple of really good throws out that got us on the front foot quickly again after he claimed the ball. But still, far too many times, he just does not get rid of it anywhere near quickly enough. And he has this sort of personal routine, which I've seen from him before, where he'll have the ball in his hands. Our players will be herring up the pitch, including getting into quite a lot of space in good areas. He'll sort of think about giving it to them, decide against it, and then sort of like make a gesture that's like, why aren't you giving me options? Why aren't you running? This is your fault. And it's like, no, like players are running. There is availability. Yeah, it would be a risky distribution for you to throw it out, but that's probably something that we're going to have to do if we're going to, try and catch teams on the break. We're going to have to take some risks. He doesn't look comfortable at this level playing the ball out in the same way that or indeed with his feet. And this is not really a knock on him particularly, but one thing that really frustrated me yesterday is, especially in the second half, so many times it felt like we were just sort of playing the ball in little triangles between him and the two centre-backs. And Randall would then knock it back to one or the other of them. And it didn't look like we really had much idea in quite a lot of those moments as to how to kind of break through. I wouldn't even say Bristol City's press necessarily, because it wasn't like they were sort of like pressing particularly aggressively, but they were kind of holding us at arm's length, right? There was some sort of press going on. And I just felt that there was sort of a slowness in all of that, including from Hazard. He didn't have by any means have a howler with his feet or anything like that, or with his distribution. But I think I think he can get better at it. And I think, as I said, as the game wore on, he did take more risks. He did bowl out a couple of kind of longer balls where he's looked and he's seen someone in a bit of space, and that was positive. I would love either him to feel more confident in doing it, or the coaching staff to sort of say to him, you actually can do that, and we're going to work with you on it, and we're going to try and. I don't think they're going to make him into a sort of Man City Academy trained goalkeeper level of passing, which is what Grimshaw has necessarily. I think Grimshaw is an outstanding goalkeeper with his feet for this or any level. But I think we can get to a point where he is good enough at that stuff that his, in my opinion, superior ability to catch crosses, command his area, make actual saves, get down to shots, have good reactions, makes him our number one ahead of Grimshaw. I think that potential is there. But the reason I wanted to talk about him is because there are elements that are really frustrating about him as well, I think. So yeah, it was a decent performance yesterday. Certainly no major errors or anything like that, but hopefully that's a side of his game he can work on, because it is something that frustrates me a bit at times.
I would point out, John.
Go on, Dan.
I was just going to say, I would point out, John, I don't think the slow distribution is entirely his fault. I noticed at least twice yesterday Hazard getting into one of those situations where I think he's going to send it quickly, and Randall said to him, slow it down. So I think there are times when it's a team instruction to just go, right, let's just settle down here, probably especially in a situation where the game's a bit hectic and Bristol City are getting on top, and we just need to calm down a bit and just keep hold of the ball for 30 seconds if we can. I think that's what's going on there. So I don't think then some of it is probably his fault, but I don't think it's a game plan more so than Hazard just being slow at it, I think.
Well, I think that in that case, it's something that they all need to work on, because even if that's what you were seeing, what I was seeing was like Whittaker herring forward at the top of his pace over the halfway line, anticipating or hoping that Hazard was going to do a little drop ball and hit it forward and let's see what we could do. And by the way, I didn't actually mention Hazard's kicking was not very good in terms of like when the ball was passed back to him and he was kicking long. His short passing was a bit slow, but okay. Some of his longer kicking was sliced up into the air. He got to the point where he was getting the, way treatment for Bristol City fans every time there was a back pass to him. He looked jittery. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Look, it's possible. I didn't notice the thing that Dan was saying about Randall telling him to slow it down. That's very possible, but there's some kind of disconnect somewhere in those kind of situations, right, that I think collectively can be sorted out and turn him into a goalkeeper who is able to do that a bit more. That's what I'd have liked to have seen from him yesterday, or maybe from the team around him as well in facilitating that. Then
I almost burst a blood vessel yesterday when I think Hazard claimed the ball with about 60 seconds to go, and there were players running left, right, and centre, and he dithered instead of hurling the ball out to try and get us on the move. I almost lost it completely. James, who's the player you want to touch on?
Well, if we could somehow meld Grimshaw and Hazard together to create the perfect set of skills that we need, I feel like we can do that with our forward line as well. So I wanted to talk about Ryan Hardy, seeing there's rumours of him leaving this January. Looking across our centre forward range, I mean, he's in such a terrible run of form that we know he's a hot and cold striker. This obviously, I feel terrible for him. That sort of run of form is going on as long as it has. And should he have buried that one yesterday, then it could have really kickstarted a scoring spree for him. But I do think he is our best pick up top at the moment. I know obviously that that we've got better finishers. Gray's obviously a much better finisher and has got that championship class, but Hardy threatens the back line and threatened the back line of Bristol City and teams when he plays, and he gives those defenders a headache, and he makes more space for Whitaker and Al-Haj to do their thing. And Al-Haj had a fantastic game, I thought, especially in the first half, and that's following some excellent games. But he's got a lovely touch. When he's got time to take that touch, it brings players in. And I think you thank Ryan Hardy for creating that space, because he threatens to run in behind. Obafemi's got pace, but he doesn't ever seem to be on the last shoulder. He never seems to threaten that space in behind. He did a great example of him doing that is against Pompey, when he obviously took a wonderful goal, an important goal there, but I don't see him do that enough. Gray obviously doesn't have the pace to threaten, while he does obviously have the have the finishing prowess to create something out of nothing, as we've seen. It just starts to feel like it gets a lot more congested in the middle when Obafemi and Gray are battling for a touch in that sort of in that final third. So rumours of Ryan Hardy leaving are quite worrying, because I don't think we've got obviously we haven't got a like for like replacement in the squad at this moment in time. And I think if Gray signs an extension and we have Obafemi and we don't add in that position, then I think we're going to lose something quite important. I know people have Argyle Twitter specifically have strong feelings about Hardy and his standard, but I think we'll lose a lot with him if he does go.
They're not the only ones who have strong feelings on Ryan Hardy's standard. Tin hat firmly placed on. I think some of the discourse I've read on social media over the last 24 hours has been utterly ludicrous about Ryan Hardy. I know that, look, I can't make any excuses for his miss yesterday. He probably should. He should at least hit the target. If somehow the keeper manages to make a save, then so be it. The issue I have with what everyone's saying, and the mitigation I think there is towards Ryan Hardy's form, I know the host shouldn't go on a rant, but I'm going to go on a little mini one here, is that if you cast your minds back to last year when Ian Foster came in, Cardiff City at home, Ryan Hardy visibly emptied the tank. There was nothing left in his body that he could have given that day. So much so, it took him an age to walk off the pitch. He wasn't time wasting. He couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. And after that game, there were one or two little situations, if you remember the back end of the season, little injury doubts. He was carrying a knock into pre-season. He's had injury issues this year as well. It's been very stop-start for Hardy since that day against Cardiff. And we all know he is a streaky striker. hopefully now he may well be over those injury issues and he may well be able to get on with it. You know, I accept what people are saying in the comments that, you know, Mr. Elo 101 says he's not been the same player since, and he hasn't been the same player since. Since Cardiff at home, he has been a shell of the Ryan Hardy we know and love. Now, the last couple of years, all we've done is praise Ryan Hardy the first half of the season and criticise the second half of the season. Maybe we're going to get a role reversal from Ryan this time around. I just think for somebody who, what is he, 53rd, 54th on the all-time scoring charts, including some incredibly vital goals last season, that without them, I know everyone goes on about Whittaker, without Hardy's goals last year, we wouldn't have stayed up either. I just think he can go through one. I think he's got enough credit in the bank. For me anyway, I might be a minority of one. I think he's got enough credit in the bank to go through a lean spell like this without getting pelters for the service he's given to the club. I know that it's a different situation though, isn't it? I don't know whether you guys have got any thoughts on this. It's a different situation to the Lewis Gibson situation, because from what I understand, Hardy's under contract next season. Lewis Gibson, from what we believe, not that anybody knows because his contract length wasn't disclosed, but we get a sense that he might be out of contract in the summer. So perhaps in the window, there's maybe if there is a value there that the club are happy with, perhaps it's a good business deal. But for Hardy, I feel like if we are heading back to League One, I'd much rather have Ryan Hardy in my squad than against me. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I'm in a weird position where I agree with both you and James to a large extent. The only thing I would quibble on in terms of what you said is that is this a poor run of form? I mean, he hasn't scored a goal from open play in nearly a year at this point. I think maybe that's more than just a poor run of form. Now, I totally agree with James that he gives a different dimension to our attack. And I thought there was one particularly good bit of play he did yesterday, which actually was to set up that Whittaker shot from 25 yards that you mentioned that was tipped onto the bar. He created a little bit of space down the right-hand side with a lovely little turn, laid it inside. That was the sort of move from him that we used to see under Schumacher. And, if Schumacher is to come in as manager, which we have no idea if that's going to happen or not, but obviously if it does, maybe he's a player who I'd like to see him go back to playing under Schumacher, who obviously got the best out of him compared to the two managers that followed. That being said, I just feel like if and again, these are just rumours, don't know if there's any truth to them. If it's true that we're being offered £2 million for him, I think that's an awful lot of money for a striker who, as someone said in the comments, hasn't scored a goal from open play since February, I believe. I just think that would be very hard to turn down. I understand also that strikers, money doesn't go as far as it used to in football, and good strikers in particular are very expensive. So I'm not saying that £2 million would get us for, a like for like 20 goal a season player who would come in and be better than Hardy. And I certainly agree there's a risk if we go down that we're giving a potential promotion rival next season a good asset that we could otherwise have. But players don't last forever at any club, and if it's a deal that makes sense, I think you just sometimes have to do it, even if it's a painful one. And I just sort of think £2 million would really stretch my commitment to keeping him if that is the fee. If it was much less than that, by the way, I would gamble on keeping him for sure. But if it's 2 or close, I think it's really hard to turn down.
I mean, my original point was more that his skills are very difficult to replace. In that, I would not sell him for £2 million if the bid came in, but we can't say, we've got Gray, Obafemi, and Isaka lined up, so we're fine, because I do think we'll be very, very short of his skill set if he was to leave. So, seeing he hasn't scored a goal in open play for a year, £2 million is an absolutely great figure, but we have to. It doesn't mean that we can rely on what we've got. I think we need to go in and sign some replace those skills and add the goals, which would be a must.
I also am not very confident Andre Gray is staying personally, so that's an area I don't know if that would factor into it.
I found it very odd today. I know a lot's been going on the last few days. I found it very odd that his contract's up tomorrow. He was in training today, but nobody has a clue if he's going to be available to us on Saturday. I just thought that was a little bit peculiar. Dan, you had somebody
also,
you
just quickly, I'm going to go on the record channeling my inner Sam Down and say that he came over and did a very, very pointed solo round of applause in front of the Devonport end before any of the other players came over yesterday, which could be an indication that he was doing two things beginning with the words W and G, but we'll see.
Yeah. Dan, you have a player that you want to pick out, and I know this is a player who at the moment is dividing opinion. He has his good moments, but when he has his bad moments, they're pretty galling, aren't they?
Yeah, Ballymumba signed for £1 million, as so was Morgan Whittaker, and given the heights Whittaker hit last season, perhaps that is made to look worse by that fact. Because as John said, £1 million isn't that much in the Championship these days. Although we shouldn't sniff at the fact that it was our transfer record. As I said at the top, he was allowed a lot of freedom to stay really high up on that left wing yesterday. And as a result, that created attacking width for us. I think we did a good job, like I say, it being quite fluid in attack. And that created opportunities to get the ball out to Mumba to run one-on-one at their defender, at their right back. Now, when you get those types of opportunities and the number of opportunities to run one-on-one at a defender, I think you should be creating more. Again, perhaps unfair to compare to Morgan Whittaker, but I feel like if you gave Whittaker the number of opportunities to run one-on-one at a fullback, he'd cause absolute havoc like he did a lot first half of last season. I just wanted to see more from Bally. It's frustrating because we know from his League One stint with us how absolutely electric he can be. And that goal against Huddersfield on the opening day last season, when he can just beat defenders at will, it hasn't happened for him for a fair while. And it's so frustrating because it's in there. And I still think he'll come good. He's still pretty young and is still developing as a player, has played at fullback a lot this season, which we know isn't his best position. I think if we go back to a back three and play him at left wing back, or if we go to this kind of inverted fullbacks for 4-3-3 and play him wide left, I think he will come good. But it was frustrating yesterday because, like I say, he had a lot of opportunities to get at their fullback and create more than he did. It didn't quite happen. Defensively, a lot is made of the fact that he struggles in that respect. Like I say, playing fullback in a back four is not ideal. But I think his work rate and his positional awareness isn't too bad. I don't think he is, and I don't think he's a liability at fullback. Put it that way, as some fans seem to think that he is. But it's just, as I say, it's kind of frustration at the minute because it's not as if you're looking at him like a player that just doesn't have enough in his locker. It's in there, and we just want to see it come out. And whether it's a confidence thing, whether it's just not quite falling from at the minute, I don't know. But it was a frustrating afternoon for him yesterday for sure.
It certainly was. Just out of curiosity, did anybody see him slip? Did he actually slip yesterday? I know that's a trademark of
Don't
games.
think he
There's
did.
often one. No, there's often one slip
Yeah.
during the 90 minutes, but I can't recall one, although I did watch quite a few football games yesterday afternoon when I got back from Argo. Seems as you three have chosen them. I'm going to go to the first question tonight. Matty Haight says, did anyone notice Morgan limping after the game yesterday? Sorinola obviously had cramp as well. I want to touch on Sorinola. I presume Morgan limping was to do with...
To be clear, I have yet to see a Sorinola game with respect to the fella where he doesn't get cramp at the end. So I don't think that's a big injury concern, to be honest with you. He very commonly pulls up towards the end of games and has to have his legs stretched out.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to touch on Sorinola because we probably didn't give him as much airtime after the Oxford game with everything that was going on that he probably deserved. Without him that day, it could have been far worse with a couple of his last-ditch tackles. And I thought he had a very comfortable game yesterday. I wouldn't necessarily go any further than that. I don't think it was necessarily his best performance in a green shirt, but I do think the issue is, and it was put to Kevin Nancekivell, I can't remember whether it was be after the game or before it, about, he hasn't ever had a settled run in the side. He's always been a couple of games, then out for a handful, then straight back in again ever since he's come into the club. And you would hope that given we're hopefully just a few weeks away from the skipper returning, that hopefully Sorinola can now pin that position down and really give whoever comes in a decision to make, whether Joe Edwards comes back into the back line or Sorinola remains. But as John says, it's a common trait with Sorinola to go down with cramp, and Kevin Nancekivell did confirm in the pre-match press conference today that that's all it was, and he should be fine. James, just very quickly, we've been on for 45 minutes. We've not even got to ref watch or even looked ahead to Saturday yet. Defensively, this is a real problem now, isn't it? Because although we're one of the lowest scorers in the division, I don't ever really have any doubts that we're not going to create enough to get goals, particularly if that level of intensity and positivity is reflected from the first half yesterday. What needs to happen here? Because I'm not sure that 4 weeks of a transfer window is necessarily going to solve our defensive issues. I think this is something that is it almost like we need to put a plaster on it and wait for the minor surgery in the summer.
I think that level of coaching that we talked about, or lack of, will be a big part of that. I was wondering when I was trying to think of what to make of the Bristol City game, was I would love to have come on and said something really insightful about something that had changed between the last Rooney games and now. And actually, I sort of felt like I didn't really learn that much, because we still conceded 2 goals at home. We still could easily have conceded a few more. Teams know that they can open us up pretty easily if they stay in the game, and they know we'll give them a few chances as well. If we need hopefully coaching will. The best I've seen us play is the last Rooney game and under Borough against Borough, where our press was absolutely fantastic in the first half, and Borough could barely get out, but we couldn't maintain that through the game, and that exactly the same traits were woeful in the Oxford game. So if we can be, if there's a level of coaching that meant we could actually press effectively, it would may start to dry up these sort of balls carved directly through our back line and change that factor. So coaching and a more aggressive midfield, I think, will be hugely influential. Those are things that could take effect this season through January, if we recruit right and both in management and in playing staff. But I think we're at such a low bar defensively that we should reasonably expect some improvement.
I wish we had the graphic that we usually have for transfer deadline day, but I have some breaking news. Plymouth Argyle have scrapped the documentary. It's gone. This is groundbreaking news that has been confirmed by The Guardian. They signed off on the project back in November, but it's understood to have been largely driven by Rooney and his advisors. And it is gone. It won't be happening. If you do want to read more on the story, then head over to the Guardian website. But no more Netflix or Amazon or whoever it was that's going to be in. So there's a bit of breaking news for you. Perhaps not the breaking news we all wanted tonight. But we will no longer, sadly, be Hollywood stars. John, we've waited long enough, haven't we? Tim Robinson of Select Group 1, also known as Premier League officials. Not just him has to come under the microscope, it has to be said. But there was plenty to talk about. Usually this is my forte, but I'm the host. Over to you.
I thought they were, and I want to just quickly, without giving him a right of reply, say that when I spoke to him after the game, Sam Downs said he thought the referee got everything right yesterday. I thought the referee was abysmal, and is what certainly his linesman on the at the Devonport end of the ground yesterday. Were there any sort of major decisions in the game that went horribly the wrong way or anything like that? No, I don't. We had a shout for a penalty for a handball. I may have shouted for it in the ground, but I think thinking back on it, it's probably nothing extremely marginal. If so, it certainly didn't look deliberate or anything like that. But just so many kind of bizarre or just completely infuriating, more minor decisions and game flow things that I thought really, let him down. I think the first thing was a Bristol City. It was either flagged for a free kick or a throw into them. I'm not entirely sure. Their player has just booted the ball into the Lyndhurst stand ages after the whistle went. It is a textbook yellow card. Absolutely nothing.
I knew you'd be livid about that, by the way.
Yeah, and were you not? This is the thing.
I was kind of a mixture of feeling partly feeling livid and partly feeling I know John Alsop is going to be screaming for this. By the way,
my absolute pet hate in football is players not getting booked for kicking the ball away. It is such a clear directive that they've been told to stamp out of the game. It is usually just so cut and dried, and this was so blatant. And he did nothing. That in isolation, lots of referees allow players to get away with that sort of thing. Fine, whatever. Did frustrate me, but you then had I'll sort of address Bristol City's time-wasting tactics and how he didn't clamp down on them. Their substitutions, he eventually started telling the players to sort of go off to the side or go behind the goal, but it took him about 2 changes for him to start saying it to them. But the first at least 1 or 2 of the players when they did their, at least 1, maybe 2, I should say, of the players when they did their triple substitution, just strolled off casually from the other side of the pitch towards the line, and maybe he had a word with them, but he didn't do anything to enforce them running off. That was frustrating as well. Again, these are things that a lot of referees allow to happen. You then have one of the worst decisions I've ever seen a referee make at Home Park, and one of the most baffling sort of periods of officiating. The bad decision was in the second half when we have a ball that goes over the top and their player has punched the ball out of play. Absolutely blatantly has used his hand to do this to the ball, to punch it out of play. It's the most obvious handball I have ever seen on a football pitch. It is also clearly a yellow card. I think you could maybe say the defender had got there first anyway, and I'm not sure why he handballed it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe he sort of got his body shape wrong. I don't think it's he's handled it purely to stop our player running through, but it's so blatant, so blatant. And then you have the end of the first half, which is the strangest period of officiating I can remember in a long time, where we have a free kick pretty much right on the whistle. The free kick is taken by Randall eventually. I think it hits the face or the midriff or so. One of their players ends up in some pain, basically. The rebound comes out and we have possession. Rightly, the referee goes back and stops play and says we're going to do treatment for the defender. He then allowed their goalkeeper to have the ball, even though it should have been a drop ball on the touchline, if I remember correctly, or something of that. We seemed to be in possession when the whistle went, as far as I can remember. So that was totally baffling that he just gave them the ball back. And then he blew up for half-time with no minutes of added time had been played. The entire allotted period of added time was taken up by treating their player. And this is a time in the game when we were in an attacking position with 1-0 down. It could make a difference. And these might seem like minor things. But again, they were not major decisions that sort of completely ruined the course of the game. But they were all just so blatantly wrong and stupid and not enforcing the rules as they should be. And it just blows. And I know Joe likes to have a rant about a referee, and I'm not averse to it, but I think maybe a bit less so than Joe. But if this is Premier League standard officiating, it is crazy that is the standard that we're talking about. Absolutely crazy. That's before. Well, I've said there were no big decisions that affected the course of the game. I mean, their first goal was offside. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt on that a little bit because it's incredibly marginal, and that's probably a VAR lines are coming out situation in the Premier League, not like a really blatant one or anything like that. So I'll give benefit of the doubt on that. But there are just so many things where you just wonder how this can be an acceptable standard of officiating from someone who officiates at the highest level. It was terrible. Rant over.
I'll give you a strong 7 out of 10 for that ref watch rant, and I'll just add a bit more flesh to the bone because I can't let this go. There is a handball in the penalty area. It is a penalty. You could hear the thud, and I'm at the other end of the ground from it hitting his hand. It is a yellow card for the player knocking the ball out of play, punching it into the stands. The referee's expression was, "Well, you've got to throw in. What more do you want?" Well, I want you to take the appropriate action. The Sorinola yellow card, I think, is probably correct. I think it's rash, and he was the first one on the scene. But I do think probably a yellow card both ways would have been justified. But the reaction of the Bristol City players surrounding the referee was embarrassing, to be frank, for something that really wasn't as bad as it seemed. But that incident at the end of the first half, John, to give the referee a bit of leeway, the ball hadn't gone out of play for a throw-in. So technically, in my opinion, they had headed it out of the box. It was going out for a throw-in to us. Nobody was going to prevent that ball from going out of play. Therefore, in my opinion, nobody is in possession of that football. Therefore, surely the correct course of action is a contested drop ball where play was halted, where the ball finished. Where the whistle was blown and the ball was about 2 yards inside the field of play, that's where the contested drop ball should have taken place. To give it back to the goalkeeper and to then let him kick it long and then blow the halftime whistle, I think is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. But, you know, as I say, it's done. I'd be here all night if I had the chance to talk about referees, but I don't. So as Aaron has said in the comments, I'll just let it go. And we will let go of the Bristol City game. 56 minutes have gone already. Well over 2,000 people giving up your Thursday nights to listen to us talk about this one. So, James, why don't we stop talking about Bristol City, and why don't we look forward to Saturday's freezing cold trip to Staffordshire, to the Potteries, to take on Mark Robbins's Stoke City. I'm not quite sure what sort of impact he's going to have had in 1.5 training sessions, because I don't imagine they'd have done too much today. This is a really tricky question, given as a new appointment. What can we expect from Stoke City?
Well, in the press conference today, Nance said that even the analysts didn't know what to expect from Stoke City. So I think it's a bit of a challenge for someone of my knowledge to come and do any better than them. I think that creates a little bit of chaos that might suit us. We don't know what to expect, and perhaps there'll be a period of transition. It's not a lot of time for Robbins to work with his squad, so there's a chance that we, there might be a slight roll of the dice that comes in our favour. That's about as much analysis as I can put on it. It would be fantastic if Schumacher was in the dugout for the rerun, but that doesn't seem to be likely at this juncture. So, which is a real shame. So yeah, I think everyone internally at the club is scratching their head. Obviously, they've got quality through the squad, but yeah, I don't know what to expect. I think anyone knows what to expect, and hopefully that works in our favour, because perhaps they won't know too much about what to expect from us.
Dan, what do you expect team-wise? Hearing Nance today, Sorinola fine. Hardy came off with a shoulder issue. I think he won a free kick, and he went down, almost nudged over in the area when defending, picked up a shoulder knock. He sounded more positive than negative, I thought. However, I couldn't say the same about Lewis Gibson. Out dead leg today, but was receiving treatment. What do you expect team-wise?
Well, it would be handy if Hardy can start, or at least come off the bench. I mean, we'll be up against, presumably, former Pilgrim Ashley Phillips in Stoke's defence. I'd like to see Hardy's pace up against him. I think he could cause him a few problems. But I guess you always want Lewis Gibson in your team at this level, I think. But it's not the worst timing in the world, in that Suture's on been putting in some reasonably solid performances, and Pleguezuelo was very good yesterday. Galloway, if we do play a back three, or obviously if back four, go to left back, again, a solid enough pick at this level. So I don't think we're desperately short of quality without Gibson, but of course he would add to that back line. So hopefully he's fit. Right back is basically it's Sorinola or no one until Joe Edwards is fit, or we sign someone else, because the Victor Paulsen at right back experiment hasn't worked. I still think under a new manager.
Could you argue the Victor Paulsen experiment at Plymouth Argyle hasn't worked?
Well, something I'm in an article which I think is going to come out on the Argyle Life website soon is, and I just want to make this point, is that as I said on the pod on New Year's Eve, good managers make players better. And I think for those players that have only been here under Ian Foster and or Wayne Rooney, there might be more in the locker for them, is all I'm going to say. Players like maybe Suchis, who hasn't been too bad, but JB, Ogbeta, Obafemi, Al Haj, Sissoko, maybe even Victor Powson played in not played at right back. I don't think. I think that's clear enough that he's not a right back. He's not quick enough. So yeah, at the minute it's basically it's just got to be it's got to be Sorinola, hasn't it? So hopefully he is fit. And if it isn't, then we might have to go back three, Mumba back to right wing back, and then someone else, probably better at left wing back if he's fit. So midfield wise, I think it was in the comments earlier tonight about kind of getting a proper central defensive midfielder in just to kind of screen the defence a bit more. And I think that's something that Jordan Houghton was so good at last season, and I'd like to see him given that opportunity again. If not, it will probably be Randall and JB again. Presumably that same kind of box with Whitaker and Al Haj ahead. And then up front, I think perhaps Obafemi starting and Hardy coming off the bench to stretch the opposition with his pace would be an option to go with. Obviously, we've had a lot of games recently. This will be, I think, our fifth game in 2 weeks, won't it? So it would be good to rotate up where we can. So I think perhaps Obafemi coming in. Maybe if we go with 4 at the back, maybe Sissoko will start as well. He looked, a bit hot and cold off the bench yesterday, but hopefully he can cause some havoc from the start. So we have got some options, which is good because obviously with the injuries we've had, we've been kind of almost forced into naming an 11 at times recently. But it'll be interesting to see what he does. We have got some options in there.
I think it's safe to say with Sissoko's cameo yesterday, as his cameo went on, he got a little bit happier on the pitch. It seemed he was very, very lethargic when he first came on and miles off it, but he grew into it, I thought. John, you signaled the football cliches klaxon earlier. Rob asks, can we do it on a cold Saturday afternoon in Stoke? What's your score prediction?
Yeah, without wishing to get myself cancelled by the good people of Stoke-on-Trent for the second season in a row, surely this is a great chance for the first away win, isn't it? They are not much further ahead of us in the table. I believe I'm right in saying that Manhurth is injured still, right? I think I saw something that he was going to be out for until like February or something. I could be wrong about that, but he
don't think he played yesterday.
He has looked their best player to me, when I've seen them in recent months. So yeah, that could be a fillip for us. And if it's if the poor away form has been a psychological thing, obviously we've had a sort of psychological break recently, right? One manager who is associated with, obviously we discussed before how the dreadful away form is not just a Rooney thing. Obviously it's a historical thing with Argyle, certainly recently in the Championship. It's, with the exception of Ian Foster, I should point out, also been a problem for other managers. But Rooney has obviously been particularly associated with the extent of the recent dire failures away from home. So maybe this is an opportunity to just mentally reset, go in with a bit more confidence, obviously off the back of the last minute point at home as well, which, as Dan said earlier, sort of just at least keeps us ticking over a little bit. So with all that in mind, I think we've got a lot of work to do. I think a new manager is going to have a lot of work to do. Doesn't look like a new manager is going to be in place, which is a bit of a shame because I think we were all having dreams about Stephen Schumacher returning, leading us to victory in his first game at the club that nicked him from us. That always felt a little bit too perfect, and it seems like that is not going to be how it plays out. But nonetheless, I think I've just got a good feeling about it, that we're going to maybe nick it. So I'll say 1-0 to the Argyle.
1-0. They've I have to say Argyle will be getting a strongly worded letter from me overnight. They've ruined my timeline of events that I put in our group chat on Sunday 9 p.m, which up to now has been pretty faultless. But the failure to appoint Stephen Schumacher today has thrown it into disarray. I've managed to get even 2 games score predictions spot on, and who was going to be in the dugout yesterday absolutely accurate. But they've failed me today. James, can we do it on a cold Saturday afternoon in Stoke? Well, we haven't done it in Stoke since 1916. Is 2025 going to break that record?
I'm ever the optimist, so I'm going to stay that way. I think with the attacking talent we've returning and hopefully with a fair wind, Ryan Hardy being fit, we could put something looking like our strongest 11 out. I think I saw it in the chat. Thought 1-1 is a good shout. Can't see us keeping a clean sheet. I think we'll score. If I was being really optimistic, I'd say we do something we haven't done for a long, long time, and that's score 2 goals away from home. So there we go, 2-1 to the Argyle.
Dan Ellard?
I just wanted to check that stat that came in 1916. That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, why not? First time in 109 years. Let's say we can do it. I mean, obviously, it's it was a galling defeat last season up there. I won't lie. I was down in the dumps for about 3 days afterwards. It was absolutely, the biggest game of our season, biggest game of Stoke season as well. Not that you know it because their fans were too busy singing about Port Vale all afternoon. But it was a huge game and we didn't turn up. As John says, it feels like time for an away win. And Stoke have got some good players. Bajan Ho's a very good player. Tom Cannon up front, but I do think we can nick a 1-0 as well. So I'll go with John's scoreline too.
I'm going to stick with what James I thought it was where he was going to go until he became the ever optimist, and where the chat went a little bit earlier. I'm going to go with a 1-1. You'd be disappointed. I mean, I'm going to this. I know John is. I don't know whether the 2 other lads are going or not. I'd be disappointed at £10 a ticket, £5 for a concession, whether or not the Bet365 isn't relatively full for Mark Robbins's first game on the Saturday.
Isn't it,
it could be quite.
Hang on, Joe. Sorry, I think it's always full. That's my understanding.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. My understanding is.
All right.
Well, I don't know because I haven't seen any data on this, and I guess the data would probably be a better guide than reputation and gut instinct. But I just think, given everything we know about them as a club, I'd be very surprised if the data suggested it wasn't full every week. But I'll check. Let me check that.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to find that out. And when Stoke's fixture came calling, I answered, and I went and got myself a ticket for this one. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'll go with a 1-1. I think it may be a case we actually take the lead, go in at half-time 1-0 up, and then unfortunately we might be pegged back in the second half, just trying to see it out. But let's hope we are able to get away with it. Right, we'll have about 10 minutes. Got some quick fire questions. We've not. You've probably noticed we've sort of avoided the head coach manager chat for tonight. That's purely because nobody has an idea what's going on. Don't read everything you see on social media.
Des
like
Buckingham, no? Isn't it Des Buckingham? That's what I heard.
No, it isn't. I'd like to think the only people who know what are going on are Simon Hallett, Andrew Parkinson, and Zach Newton. So as I say, don't believe everything
and Stephen Schumacher,
you read.
Please.
Hopefully, and Stephen Schumacher. I not necessarily go as far as what I did on the pod last year when I said I'd give a vital organ for something to happen, but I'm desperate for Shuey to come back. So hopefully that will happen in the next week. If it does, you can rely on us to be back with an emergency podcast whenever the period of sede vacante is over. Right, quick fire questions. Let's go through them. Let's not dither on these too much as I did it on that. Matty hates this. Does anyone have any idea what's going on at the club? No, basically. As I say, don't read everything. Don't believe everything you read. Rooney. Evening, Wayne. Dan, has anyone seen Gibson gone to Middlesbrough? I think we're fairly comfortable that Lewis Gibson was actually in attendance yesterday, aren't we? And he's injured. So where do you sit on this argument? Obviously, he's out. We believe he's out of contract. As I said, nobody actually knows. Where do you stand on it all?
He was there yesterday, but and he could well genuinely be injured. But the words Halmosi's knee come to mind. So again, I don't want to assume either way. He might be off, he might not. We'll have to wait and see on that. Again, it's this, if the rumours are true, and it's supposedly, I think 2 million was quoted again, wasn't it, for Gibson? If that's the case, and if his contract's up, that's not a bad deal. I do think he's a very good centre half at this level, and I think in a better team he'd show how good he really is. But again, it's that kind of thing of losing for. There's a fair chance that if we do go down and his contract's up in the summer, he's gone. Surely he's gone. I think championship teams would be queuing up to get him in. So it would be a frustrating way to lose him. But like I say, I think encouraging performance from Pleguey yesterday. It is only one game, and we have seen some kind of him being a bit hot and cold so far in his Argyle career. Cornell Such has been pretty good for us so far, I would say. We've got Galloway can play left centre back as well. So it wouldn't be the end of the world, I think, if we lost Gibson, and I think we could, provided we reinvested that money smartly. Again, comes back to what we said earlier in the week, that we've been good up until recently, been pretty good at kind of investing our money wisely. So I think if we did reinvest that money wisely, then we could get some good players in for that.
Someone also fairly well connected told me that Gibson's contract is actually next summer. I'm not claiming any ITK knowledge there, but someone who would have good connections told me that it was next summer. So any assumptions that it's this summer I would say to keep that in mind.
Right. If that is the case, then tell Middlesbrough where to go. If they're only offering 2 million and he's still got 18 months left, tell him where to go.
There was a local journalist in that part of the world tweeted that there was no interest from Borough. So would seem like a source on the other end has maybe said that. I don't know what anyone else thinks about this. I sort of feel like Gibson would have been a bigger loss this time last year. I'm not saying he wouldn't be a loss. He would be, a very significant loss. He's an excellent player for all the reasons that Dan outlined. But I just sort of think that last season it felt like he was sort of the linchpin of our defence. And this season the defence is such a shambles that it just needs a total reorganisation anyway. And so, his presence in the team has not stopped us in and of itself conceding absurd numbers of goals quite frequently. So I think if we're offered a good fee for him, this is what our model is supposed to be, right? Getting players in for free or on the cheap, and then developing them as players and selling them on for big money. I think if it was a significant amount of money offered, it would be another one where it's hard to turn down for me.
James rocking up at the back post there with some wonderful ITK news and slamming it home, Rami El Haj-esque. That will be clipped off if it turns out that Dan Gibson? Goodness me, it's been a long day. Lewis Gibson walks away on a free transfer at the end of the season when his contract expires. James, I'll come to you. Seems as well, I'm now trusting you as our insider. When is Tijani expected to return? That's an interesting one.
I think I only read what other people have said on social that it's the end of the month, February. I don't know where I've picked that information up, but I don't think his return is imminent. And I think when Rooney gave an update in last time, he was the last of the arrivals, or was on par with Edwards. Was that everyone else's understanding?
I know Edwards is expected back sort of Sunderland at the earliest, but I think it was more likely West Brom. I think I was just milling around the grandstand and I overheard somebody talking about that, how credible the information is, I don't know. But the talk was always going to be, it was late January, early February for the skipper. Whether or not standing on the touchline is escalating or delaying his comeback, I'm not sure. Robin's Nest asks, who else other than Beidou is rumoured to be joining us? Transfer Centre is live. Adam is going to be a very busy boy, I sense, this month. So do head over to the Argyle Life website. Adam is constantly updating the Transfer Centre. I don't think we've been linked with anybody new in the last couple of days. I think it's just the usual ones that we had through the autumn and into the winter. I did see somebody photoshopped. I got done by earlier. Somebody photoshopped Joe Gelhart's name to the squad naming list on the back of shirts, but it was a Photoshop job.
And it was spelled wrong as well. It was spelled Geldhart, and Joe still fell for it.
Geldhart. Exactly. I'd say long day. Dan Underwood asks, do you guys believe that Schumacher is in talks to come back? Well, as we sort of alluded to earlier, Dan, we don't really know what's going on at the moment. I think we're all probably unanimous in that he may well actually be our first choice if he wants it, and if Uncle Simon's willing to give it back to him. But yeah, as I say, we don't know anything, and when we do know, it's likely that you'll know at the same time. Last but not least, it's not a question for any individual. It's just a talking point that's come in from Argyle 83. And on mentioning Steven Schumacher, this was something reflecting on it, I thought he has incredible luck with, and that was injuries. In all the time that Shuey was manager, we never, particularly the title-winning season, we didn't ever seem to really have a crisis. Is this just our year where on a cyclical basis it's come round that this is our year that we just have a horrific injury list? Because it's been quite lengthy ever since we got tanked at Sheffield Wednesday, isn't it?
Seems like there's quite a few teams around who've racked up a decent number of injuries this year at our level. Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's an interesting point about Shuey. I mean, Finazaz missed quite a large chunk of that title-winning season, and obviously it didn't matter in the end because we won the league anyway. But I think given how good he subsequently proved to be when he was able to get a run in the team at full fitness, and given how scarily good he looked in the couple of games before he got that injury, that was a big miss that we managed. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't as bad as it is at the moment for sure. Although I do think that better coaches and managers can can accommodate injury crises to greater and lesser extents by changing their tactical plan, rejigging things. Rooney's approach seems to more be, let's say there's a lot of injuries and not really work out how to actually reconfigure the team in a sustainable way in the absence of those players. But it does seem, in fairness to him and just to the question raised, like there has been a particular glut of them for us this year. I think it's probably bad luck mostly. I know Dan has a different view, but yeah, I don't know.
The last time I remember a crisis like this was when poor Derek Adams went through about 300 goalkeepers in one season. I don't remember luck like it. Dan, what's your take on it all?
Well, my take is unproven, so I appreciate it is a bit of a conspiracy theory, if we do want to call it that. But I do think it's a hell of a coincidence.
We're good at them on the podcast.
Yeah, I just think it's a hell of a coincidence. And the one I want to point out is Rooney said in an interview a couple of days before Christmas that he was stepping up the training intensity. We were going to go really hard on training for this run up till Christmas and really kind of up the intensity. Now, within a week of him saying that, 3 players got injured. That seems to me, and I believe 2 of those were non-contact injuries as well, not during games. That seems to me like a hell of a coincidence, Plus, added to the fact that apparently at Birmingham he had, long injury lists as well in the time that he was there. It just seems to me like, and the number of injuries as well. It just seems crazy. And again, I know this can't be proven. It might well just be bad luck. It might well be that, but I can't shake the feeling that there is more to it, and maybe something either the things we were doing on the training ground, or the intensity of the sessions, or the number of the sessions, something like that wasn't being done right, and as a result, we were getting more injuries than we needed to. So it's a bit of a tricky one, because, like I say, I can't prove it, but a lot of people just say, "Oh, he had such horrendous luck with injuries." Maybe, but maybe not.
There was also, to
James,
Dan's point, it is circumstantial, but The Athletic did a longish piece about Rooney's tenure at Plymouth and where it all went wrong, and there was a line in there to the effect of it is understood that the players that it was a classic journalism passive voice. It was felt that the players were not capable of playing at the intensity that Rooney demanded, or words to that effect, which, reading between the lines, sort of suggested, not fit enough or good enough, basically, for his, according to what he was expecting. So I don't think it's a total conspiracy theory from Dan. It is, again, probably a bit of both, right? Like, there's certainly a degree of bad luck in there, and some of the injuries are, I think more impact or sort of bad luck related. But yeah, there are some muscle ones in there, including since Rooney made those comments about upping the frequency of training. So there could well be something.
James, do you have anything to add on the injury chat?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and it speaks to very much in the conspiracy camp, but is that I feel like the information and allegations and hearsay that came flooding out in the media wake of Rooney's dismissal, I think, had a huge bearing on events, and that perhaps he would have been given time or given budget to, if there'd been hadn't been a sort of question marks over professionalism and standards within the club. And I think the fact that injuries have been a factor this season, and there seems to be question marks over training and application, I think those two things sit side by side. Whether anyone wants to draw those connections, up to them. But I think there's question marks over what's been going on behind the scenes. And in that same article that John mentioned, they talked about Rooney drifting in the latter part of the season, as the challenge was too much. He was tiring of the relentlessness of the challenge, and I feel like that sort of speaks volumes.
Certainly does. The final question from VW Coco says, any news on Bundu? That was touched on in today's press conference. From what Nance alluded to, it's not as bad as they all first feared at Coventry. And all being well, it's unlikely, I think, he'll be in the squad this weekend unless a miracle happens. But it sounds very much like he will be involved in some capacity at Brentford. But more importantly, of course, after Brentford, we do have that huge week of 3 home games in a row. Last but not least, Fleety 10 just snuck it in just as I was about to do the outro. Any news on Andre Gray's situation contract? No, Nance didn't even know himself. They were training this afternoon. Andre Gray was in the building. So I presume discussions would have been going on post-training. That's it from us, unless you guys have got any other business. I don't think there's anything off the top of my head that's AOBs. So thank you very much to well over 2,800 of you who've given up your Thursday night this evening to join us. We will be back for our 4th podcast in 7 days on Sunday evening. We'll be back on Sunday.
My hamstring's just gone.
John might have to be rotated out on Sunday.
We got to look at Aaron Hocking's training methods, I think, here, guys.
Yeah, I think we might do. I will be in Staffordshire. John will be in Staffordshire. Those who are going to the game, it's going to be sodding cold, so do make sure you wrap yourselves up. But do really, I urge us all in that away end to really get behind Nance and Joe on Saturday. I thought the atmosphere was a little bit up and down at Home Park yesterday. And hopefully we can get a raucous away end going at the amphitheatre that is the Bet365 Stadium, such a hostile atmosphere that it often tends to be. James, John, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. As VM Coco says, Luke Littler, Stephen Bunting, if you are a dartist, is now on the television. From all of us at the Green Life podcast, we will see you again on Sunday, and keep the faith.